You see it every day, right? The massive, and I mean massive, gap between the super rich and everyone else. And it just feels wrong. But here's a tough question. Is that gut feeling actually enough to call it unjust? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the philosophical arguments that really challenge how we think about wealth, fairness, and what we owe each other. It gets pretty interesting. Okay, to really get this, we've got to go way back to 1785. A theologian named William Paley came up with this wild mental image. Picture this: 99 pigeons, all working their tails off, gathering a huge pile of food, only to hand it all over to a single, often weaker pigeon. It's nuts, right? But Paley's point was this bizarre scene is basically a perfect mirror of human society. And wow, does that analogy still hit hard? And this isn't just some old-timey philosophical idea. Get this. A report from 2016 found that the 62 richest people on the entire planet had as much wealth as the poorest half of the world's population. Let that sink in. That's 3.6 billion people. All of a sudden, Paley's weird pigeon story doesn't seem so weird anymore. It feels chillingly accurate. So yeah, your gut is probably screaming that this is just fundamentally wrong. And that's a powerful feeling. But, and this is a big but, philosophy pushes us to ask, is feeling wrong the same as being unjust? And this is exactly where a surprisingly powerful counterargument enters the chat. And that's where we run smack into the libertarian challenge. This whole perspective basically argues that when we complain about, unfair distribution, we're starting from a totally flawed place. We're not even using the right metaphor for how wealth gets made in the first place. So here's the core idea. We tend to think of wealth like this giant pie that some authority figure, like the government, bakes and then is in charge of slicing up. So if your slice is too small, you can blame the person cutting the pie. But libertarians say, nope, that's not how it works at all. There is no central pie cutter. Wealth just emerges. It's created from the bottom up by billions of individual choices, trades, and new ideas. The economist Friedrich Hayek had a really cool name for this: spontaneous order. Think about the price of your morning coffee. Who decides that? The answer is no one. And everyone. The price just happens, naturally, from the complex dance of millions of producers and consumers sending signals to each other. Hayek argued that if any central planner tried to control that, they'd fail miserably, because there's just no way one person or group can know everything that's going on everywhere. And the philosopher Robert Nozick boiled this all down to 3 simple, powerful words. His point is this: let's say you could wave a magic wand and make everyone perfectly equal. What happens the next day? People start working, trading, giving gifts. Maybe one person's great idea takes off. Boom, your perfect pattern is gone. The very act of being free to make our own choices messes up any pre-planned pattern. Now, this all builds up to Nozick's big idea, his entitlement theory, and it completely flips the script on what justice means. He says we shouldn't be looking at a snapshot, who has what right this second. That's looking at the end state. Instead, he says we have to look at the history. We have to watch the movie, not just look at the final frame. How did people get the stuff they have? Were the rules followed? And his whole theory really comes down to 3 rules of the game. Rule 1. Did you get the property fairly in the first place, when it was unowned? Rule 2. Did you get it from someone else voluntarily, through a sale or a trade or as a gift? And Rule 3. If someone did steal or cheat somewhere in the past, has that been fixed? If the answer to all of that is yes, Nozick argues, then however the wealth is distributed is just, no matter how unequal it might look. Okay, so this whole way of thinking forces us to draw a really sharp line in the sand. If you see someone who's extremely poor, you now have to ask a different question. Is this the result of an injustice done to them, or is it just terrible misfortune? And here's the breakdown. An injustice means someone broke the rules. They stole from you, they defrauded you. There's a bad guy in the story who has to make it right. But a misfortune, that's just life happening. Your business failed. You made a bad investment. It's awful, for sure. But since no one wronged you, there's no moral justification for forcibly taking money from other people to fix your problem. And this, right here, is where the argument gets really, really uncomfortable for a lot of us. What if someone is in desperate, catastrophic poverty, but you can't point to a single person who cheated them or stole from them? According to this logic, is their situation just cosmically bad luck, a terrible misfortune, but not an injustice that the government has any business fixing with other people's money? Now hold on. There is a bit of a safety valve built into this theory. It's called the Lockean proviso. It's a condition on that very first step of acquiring stuff. It basically says, sure, you can claim unowned land or resources, but you can't be a jerk about it. You have to leave enough and is good for everyone else. Your personal gain shouldn't create a direct loss for others. Sounds good, right? But here's the catch. In our complex world, that rule is almost impossible to apply. Modern poverty isn't caused by one guy fencing off the last water hole in the desert. It's more like death by a billion paper cuts. It's the end result of countless tiny transactions, none of which seems unfair on its own. So, who do you blame? There's no single person to point the finger at. And this is where it feels like we've hit a wall, you know? It feels like something is missing from the puzzle. And maybe, just maybe, we've been using the wrong definition of responsibility this whole time. Okay, let's unpack this because this distinction is a real game changer. There are two types of responsibility. First, you've got blame responsibility. This is all backward looking. It's about figuring out who's at fault for something bad that happened. It's the classic, you broke it, you fix it. But then there's remedy responsibility, and this is totally different. It's forward looking. It's not about who made the mess. It's about seeing a problem that exists right now and having a duty to help fix it. It's about saying, okay, this is our problem now, so let's solve it together.
The easiest way to get this is the flatmate analogy. So if your flatmate steals your pizza from the fridge, that's clear-cut blame responsibility. They're to blame, they owe you a pizza. Simple. But what if the shared kitchen is just a total disaster? Not because one person trashed it, but because everyone's been a little bit messy all week. No one is technically to blame, but you all have a shared remedy responsibility to clean it up because you all have to live with the consequences. It's a group problem that needs a group solution.
And this brings up a killer question for the purely libertarian view. I mean, even the most hardcore libertarian agrees that we should all pitch in, through taxes, to pay for police and courts and a justice system. Why? To protect our property. That is literally an enforced shared remedy responsibility. So, if we all accept that we have to do that one together, why should it be the only one? Why is protecting property the only collective problem we're allowed to solve together by force? So, this brings the whole conversation full circle, right back to that fundamental question. In a just society, what do we actually owe to one another? Let me throw a famous thought experiment at you from the philosopher Peter Singer. Imagine you're walking past a shallow pond and you see a small child drowning. You're wearing an expensive new suit. What do? Well, obviously, you jump in and save the kid. Who cares about the suit? A human life is at stake. It's a no-brainer. Okay. Easy enough, but now let's scale this up so it looks more like the real world. Imagine the same pond, but this time there are 50 drowning children, and there are 1,000 people standing around the edge of the pond, watching. Suddenly, it's not so simple, is it? Whose job is it? Do you jump in? Or do you figure, well, surely someone else will handle it? This is a classic coordination problem. And the crazy thing is, even if every single one of those 1,000 people is a good person who wants to help, you can still end up with a total disaster. Why? Because when responsibility is spread so thin among everyone, it feels like it belongs to no one. The only way to solve this is with an organized system. You need a plan, like everyone agreeing to chip in a few bucks to hire a full-time lifeguard whose job it is to save those kids. So where does all this leave us? Well, maybe the libertarians are right that justice isn't about the government slicing up a pre-existing pie. They've got a really good point there. But maybe a truly just society is about creating a system of fair rules that can do two things at once. One, protect our individual freedoms and property, and two, create a way for us to effectively tackle our shared immediate responsibilities, like preventing people from dying of poverty. And that leaves us with one last massive question to chew on. We all pretty much agree that a core function of a just society is to protect our property. But what is its duty? What are our shared rules when it comes to protecting people from catastrophic misfortune that we as a group absolutely have the power to prevent? And that, at the end of the day, is the real heart of this debate.